What's up, everyone? This is Heis, Mark here. Last time we dropped off a load of logs here at the log pond. Today I want to flesh out our sawmill setup just a little bit more so that we're ready to run trains in a bit more of an advanced way. And I want to talk you guys through kind of a railroader's perspective of what the industry should look like. So let's get started. First things first, the very exciting task of clearing trees. Always a joy. I like to clear a lot of trees around each industry. It kind of gives you a blank canvas to work with, more or less, and it gives you better line of sight when you're actually switching cars. And so if you clear out a lot of trees, you can kind of get a better picture for where the track really needs to go and what options you have available. So I like cutting down a lot of trees. You know, it doesn't hurt the environment, right? There's no environment in this game. So cut them all down. Be a mad lad like, I think it's Aikawa. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but one of our Discord members actually cut down by hand every single tree on the map. Not even using like Godspeed or dev powers or anything, just a plain old user of the game, and they cut down every single tree. And there's several 100,000. I think the last number that I heard from Kyume is that there's about 300,000 trees on the level, so someone's done it. Someone has cut all of them down, and that still impresses the heck out of me. But right now I'm just trying to clear out a little bit of space between my main line and the industry so that we can build that turnback loop that I was talking about in the previous episode. And if you didn't check the previous episode out, make sure you check it here. It's got a lot of great Q&A and a lot of great track laying tips all the way throughout it. So if you're interested in any of that sort of thing, make sure you check that video out. And as always, if you have any questions about Railroads Online or railroads in general, or anything else, feel free to leave a comment and let me know what you think. And I'll see if I can answer it either on in the next video or as a reply to your comment. So I'm not entirely certain how I want to do this reverse loop. I've never actually built one over this direction. I've done about, this is my fourth playthrough, I think, of the game. The first time started before the game was released, before it was even Railroads Online, actually. It was a beta branch for American Railroads back in, summer 2021. And the first playthrough was entirely dev, Godspeed, everything ridiculous. The second playthrough was, trying to do it for real, but I only made it partway through, and then I had a save file corruption issue, or I think I saved over it, actually. And then the third playthrough was my last save, which I did all holistically incorrect, but, in that save, I tried laying a bunch of weird, different routes just to try them and see what else was possible. So it was kind of a weird railroad. And if you watched Con Gaming's video with me talking about the physics updates, you got to see my iron ore route, and it features quite the unusual, unrealistic bridge. So, not exactly the best path out there, but I was trying new stuff because I, already had a couple playthroughs. So we might do some of that this go around, see if we can take new routes and try and have a fun time with it, do some Uintah Railway isms. If you're not familiar with the Uintah Railway was a bonkers, insanity, ridiculous railroad, for lack of a better term, on the western slope of the Rockies in Colorado. And it was run by the U.S. Army, and they primarily hauled, I think it was gypsum and gilsonite, over ridiculous terrain that you shouldn't have had trains operating on, really. So they, we actually have a couple other locomotives on the tech tree. They were 3-foot narrow gauge, but they had this curve that was called Morrow's Castle, and it was, believe it or not, widened to a 66-degree curve when they had the articulated locomotives that they purchased that are on the tech tree. Widened, not sharpened. It was sharper than 66 degrees originally. And for context, 66-degree curve is I think it's about a 180-foot diameter circle. So, I mean, that's turning around just like, I mean, super, super, super tight. Ridiculous. Something that you obviously couldn't do on standard gauge, and I mean, most narrow gauge trains couldn't actually go around it. They had to have special draft gear and couplers. Draft gear is the system that the coupler is attached to that interfaces with the car. They had special draft gear and couplers so that they could actually go around these sharp curves. Because you'll notice in game, I think for us with the Lincoln pins with standard couplers, once you get to about a 45-degree curve, you can't go any sharper than that. It doesn't work. So it's kind of hilarious that's how sharp it was. I mean, a ridiculous prototype of a railroad, and that's even leaving out the fact that it was on a 7.5% grade. I mean, just a absolutely bonkers piece of railroad. So, all right, I think we can start trying to lay our industry tracks now that we've cleared some trees. And so the primary idea is, okay, well, we want to have a turn-back track that's relatively easy to use for our log train, because that's pretty much a one-trick pony of going to the logging camp and coming here, and we want to make it easy because it's going to be a big deal for our early game, and I'm hoping that we'll get, you know, bigger locomotive and more cars relatively quick so that we don't have to do the push-pull that we've been doing. So I'm going to set up the return loop. And as well, we want to make sure that there's either a way to store all of our log cars so that they're not on the log pond track so we can run a cordwood train through here, or we need to build storage for them. You know, we need to facilitate a train running through without hitting our log cars, because ultimately we're going to need cordwood to go to the smelter as well, right? And we might just bypass the sawmill altogether for that. I don't know. We'll see. Probably not, though. And then as well, we also need to have a way for our regular trains with beams and lumber to get loaded. And we want to make sure that we've got storage for those cars and hopefully storage for loaded cars. Because the dream is that you build a bunch of tracks and you do work at the industry, and then you can have loads ready to go so that, you know, if you realize you need just a couple more cars of beams, you can just go grab them and not have to load them. But we'll see. So a lot of storage, and, you know, make sure that we can have the trains flow easily in and out of the industry and, you know, make operations kind of fluent. So let's start with this turnback track. So I realized I keep calling it a turnback track and not a reverse loop, and that's a spillover from my day job again. I work as a signal engineer, and a turnback track is actually something that we have in the transit system for, you know, if you've got a branch line off of the main section of the transit system, you have a track in the middle where you can pull off and then turn around, go to the other main line in a 2-track main line setup. And so yeah, a little different than a reverse loop, but at the same time they serve a similar function. So I'm just freehanding this, and you know, we'll see how it turns out. I might have to come back with the tool again. Oh, that's right. My my grade was so good that it ended like directly at the log pond track. So we'll actually have to put a little bit of a grade on this as well. So I'm gonna grab a constant grade again, and we'll just try a quarter and see if that lines up. And that lines up pretty good. So we could do that. And now we got to get rid of this chunk of rail, get our switch in place, and then we'll connect everything. So we've orphaned the poor porter for the time being. All right, so about there, honestly, will be pretty nice. We'll get rid of that chunk of rail. And then I don't know if I directly want to connect these. That might be a bit of a kink. That's not too bad. I can live with that. This one, I'll have to correct the angle a little bit. Being careful to make small adjustments because I'm making really short pieces of track so that we don't get too many kinks like that. I said I was being careful, but not careful enough. That's one of the big tips that I didn't really hit, is if you have to have really short pieces of track, make sure you're making really small adjustments so it doesn't look too bad. That's not brilliant, but I can live with that. We'll see how it works, and if it's too gross, we can replace it later. But knowing how this works out, we probably won't, even if it, unless it derails trains, it's going to stay in service. That's kind of the real railroad way. Does it work? Yes. Okay. It's not getting changed. So you want to start a couple tracks back. And I'm trying to start on the outside so that I can... It's almost like I'm taking a racing line through the corner, trying to make it as smooth as possible. Make the broadest turn that you can given the geometry you have. I have a feeling that that's kinked a little bit, and we're definitely doing a through the weeds, not around them kind of approach. Okay, well that's not awful. It's a little gross right there, but I think it's gonna work, so I think we'll leave it. All right, so we got a good reverse loop, and it's a pretty sizable length. So I think what we'll do is we'll just make it so that we'll park the cars in the reverse loop, and I think that'll just work nicely when we're finished with them. Although that does leave us an interesting question, where either we're going to have a dedicated train set for the logging camp with a dedicated locomotive, or we need to have another way to run around the train, because if I pull in and I'm facing the opposite way the porter is right now, I'll dump my I'll unload all the logs, and then come to bring the train in, and then if I park, and then I've got to go pick up something else, now we're facing the other direction. So you almost need a runaround through the reverse loop, or better, storage. I'm not sure what to do, actually. It's a good question, and I don't really have space for more switches right here. I guess we could double track it all the way through. That could get a little interesting. Or we could close the loop off, but I don't really want to do that. Or we could just make a Y and deal with the ramifications of that. I don't know. We'll kind of see how operations go and sort it out from there. There's not a whole lot of space on this side of the sawmill, so we don't really have a lot of options as far as turning the train around or storing cars on this side of it. So I think we'll have a Y outside the industry, so that'll take care of our rotation problem, I think. So let's try and let's get some tracks going here. And I think I'm going to want to have a fair bit of car storage through here. But we're not really set up for that with this approach. And there's not a good place to make a different approach either. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to just have the storage tracks be next to the industry loading. So we're going to wander over to the right here to facilitate making this really sharp turn. Yeah. Oh, this approach has really not set us up for success, has it? We were focused on the goal of getting the logs in the log pond, and I don't know. We'll see. I'm going to get... I think it's going to be easier if I start from the endpoint. I start from the straight, because this is defined, right? We know that we need to be straight at this platform, and I'm just running groundwork over there to keep the height. We know that we need this. So, and we know that we need to mate up with the switch, but we don't really know the exact nature of what the in-between's going to be. So I think I'm going to try this, and you're going to finally see me use the angle snap tool, because this is going to have to be kind of precise. So I'm going to start, and I'm going to lay a single piece of groundwork, and now I'm going to lock it in. And we're going to give it a gentle curve to begin. Allow us a little bit of spiral room, compound curve. And now we're just going to go for it. And I'm going to try it for about a 30 degree. Okay, so we can get a sharp curve in there, but I don't know if it's going to want to mate up with our switch here. Yeah. you can see that I'm kind of out of practice with it. I have a couple bits that look all right through here, but there's... yeah, this is a little gross. That's trying to cram too much railroad and not enough space. I think it'll work, but I'm just imagining a Class 70 going through here and throwing up in my mouth a little bit. So let's not and say we did, shall we? I think we're gonna have to put a switch back in over here and run a second track all the way around. I want to redo that corner now that I... corner, he says. I want to redo that curve now that I have, you know, a better set of boundary conditions for it. All right, so let's do it again. Angle snap's turned on. And I need to rebind my keys. I know that this is an issue that we have that comes natively with the game, and it's a little silly. The fact that the turn off the tooltips is the same as change your curve. And it's one of those things that it's like, yeah, we remember that's a problem, but it's like, we've got so many other things on our plate to take care of that are important that we always forget to make that one little silly change. So bear with us on that. All right, so I'm gonna start about halfway. Start with a 15 degree, and I'm gonna try and lay these in about the same size as the same length as the rails themselves, so that they end up making some amount of sense. And the reason that I keep picking a 30-degree curve is that a 30-degree curve is the designed maximum for the K37 cost locomotive, which is on the tech tree. And it's a locomotive that I'm familiar with. And yes, it will look very silly with that massive locomotive going around that sharp of a curve, but I have seen it do it, and I've seen it go through a sharper curve than that, actually. Oh, and that's a good story. That was the fastest I've ever seen the color drain out of someone's face, is what that was. Anyways, we were operating the 491 for the Polar Express, and the Railroad Museum's track, it wasn't built with operating a huge locomotive in mind, and particularly not a huge locomotive that many times over the same stretch of track. One of our track volunteers always has a great saying that puts it into perspective. Everyone looks at the museum's track and goes, well, it's just a half mile of track. You know, what does it matter how good it is? But he goes, piece of track that sees 100 trains a day when we operate. It's like, oh, well, yeah, I guess we do go over the same bits a whole bunch, so any kind of fatigue failures are certainly a possibility. So, and what we had was exactly that. We had a fatigue issue where at the top of our hill, I mean, the whole thing's a sharp right-hand curve, right, because it's a circle. But at the top of the hill, the track was ballasted pretty much with dirt and river rock. I mean, it was just whatever fill that they had cut out to make the cut that they had at the railroad. So it wasn't real ballast, and so maybe you can see where this is going, or if you've dealt with a track or railroad engineering, you could probably see where this is going. But long story short, 491 put the track where she wanted it, and she moved the track something like 6 feet on center, out to the outside of the curve. I mean, just kept moving every time it was running over it. You know, it didn't do it all at once. It wasn't like it was one big failure, but it slowly worked the track over and over and over until it was 6 feet over. And so, I mean, that's literally 2 track lengths. So, I mean, that would be like this track being here, being moved over to here. Even a touch more than that on center, right? So that's, that is, it was kind of astounding that it did that, but that was the problem of running, you know, a big engine with, running a big engine in such a small space. So it took the curve that was once like a 26 degree or something curve, and it made it, you know, an absolutely ridiculously sharp curve. I mean, a hairpin, really. I mean, sharper than 30 degrees by a lot. I mean, you couldn't even measure it because it was just kind of an instantaneous change. And we knew something was weird from the cab when we were going around it, it's kind of hard to tell what's going on when you're operating at night a lot of the time, particularly when you're in a steam engine and your headlight is very far away from where you're sitting. But in the seat, you could feel the locomotive kind of pivot almost when we ran through that piece of track. And so we called our boss and had him come look at it, and we crawled through that corner as slow as we could so that he could see what was going on. He had his flashlight out. I've never seen color drain from someone's face so fast before. Right when we were going through the sharpest part of that curve, the suspension of the locomotive ran out of travel. The wheels, the suspension's kind of set up like a tripod on a steam engine, where you have the left and right side rear drivers tied in with the trailing truck if it has one. So on a 282 Mikado that 491 is, you have, driver 3 and 4 tied in with the trailing truck on each side all together. And then the front is all one big unit. So left and right, 1 and 2 connect to each other. And then they have a what they call the transverse equalizer that runs across, but ahead of the number 1 driver, and then goes to a bar in the middle that then runs up to the lead truck, which is the part called the sword equalizer, so that you basically have 3 independent suspensions that help the wheels stay in contact with the track. So with each wheel tied in together, when you're going around a curve, as one wheel raises or lowers, it causes, the load to get shifted around and the suspension moves up and down. Well, the suspension ran out of travel, and 491 just picked her lead truck straight off the track and had it floating in the air. And so we got a very rapid stop signal. And so we stopped. And I'll be darned if 491's lead truck wasn't like on the inside rail. It was something like 9 or 10 inches off the ground. I mean, it was absurd. It's like cartoon stuff you don't see. So, yeah, so that's not a good time. And that's why we try to shoot for a 30-degree curve and not more, because, if you start getting more, you start having locomotives trying to dance, which is not a good thing. It's not a feature. That's a good time. Let's see. I think this curve came out better this go around. Yeah, look at that. Okay. It's a little wonky on that end there, but I think we can live with that. It's actually the nicest I've had this curve at the sawmill yet, so... Okay, now we've got some thinking to do on what we want to do as far as storage tracks go. We've got space to put a switch in over here. We could do that and then mimic this curve a little bit, and maybe that's the move to do, because I personally like to have a firewood depot right here so that you can just load directly across and dump beams, excess beams, because, well, before beams were cheaper, so I guess maybe it might not make sense to use them anymore now that they're more expensive. But if you place the firewood depot, on this side, you could just directly load and then unload cars into the firewood depot. But that also takes up a lot of space as far as storage can go. So if we do that, obviously we could have like one storage track maybe, and maybe that's all we need on the far side. But if we don't put one of those firewood depots there, we could... pretty tightly have 3 or 4 tracks over here. But I don't know if we'll need 3 or 4 tracks. Maybe just 2 storage tracks, one for beams, one for lumber would be nice. And then I don't want to have it on the other end. I want to be able to leave cars at the loading stations and not have any issues with that. I think we're going to put the firewood depot where I said I was going to put it, and then we'll see what works otherwise. Get pretty perpendicular, and you can see kind of where the supports are going into the grade, so that's vaguely close. I think we can run with that. That'll work. So now we'll come put a switch in over here. Let's see. Is that enough space for a switch? Oh lordy, that's like just enough space for a switch. So one thing that I see asked on the Discord, and I'm sure some of you folks on YouTube are probably thinking the same thing, is what about shorter switches? Because this is actually a decently long switch for an aero gauge. Like it's more like a number 8 or a number 10 or something as far as switch number goes. And for those unfamiliar with switch number, it's the degree of separation here. So once you get to the frog, for every feet, X feet going this way, you have X feet going this way. So like a 6 is you have 6 foot for 1 foot. So a bigger number is a shallower switch. But this switch, it's not just the angle that's different. It takes its time to get there. Like we could condense this pretty significantly, this distance. And we do have shallower models coming. Part of the reason the switches are as they are is because the way that the actual simulation works with the collision actually being modeled with the wheels and track. So that's also why we only have a 90-degree crossover to start, is we actually didn't even know if the crossover was going to work or if the switches were going to work necessarily, because the way that we actually simulate the wheels on rail. So one of the unique challenges that we ended up running into with trying to do that for real. So, but we now obviously know that they work, and different degrees of diamonds and switches will be coming out, within reason, to ensuring that they'll actually operate correctly and all that too. So, all right, this is going to look like a firewood loading track, but it's really just going to be storage. So we'll just leave cars here. It always feels silly building all this infrastructure when I still only own the 5 cars from the first video, but it's important to get on it here. And I don't really want to... where do I put this switch? Maybe we put it up here. Let's make sure it's not in that bit of a curve. That way we can have our 2 storage tracks. That's going to be a bit tight there, I think, because, yeah, we're running into the hillside a little bit. We knew it was going to be tight with the firewood depot as it is, but I think it's going to work. And this would be a great location to have a smaller switch, so hopefully we see those sometime soon. But I don't know if the models have been made yet. I know that one of the modelers got asked to do them, but I haven't seen any pictures, so I cannot confirm that they're in progress at the moment. All right, that's certainly not perfect, but this is going to be storage, not high-speed mainline stuff, so we're going to run with it. It's starting to turn into a little bit of a nice-looking industry here. A couple different tracks. I'll have to add some more flavor to it. Maybe an engine shed or something, I don't know. If you guys have any suggestions for what I should do, or a better layout or anything, I'd love to see it. Hear your suggestions in the comments. That tree really did not want to get deleted. Not sure why. That was kind of weird. All right, let's see if we can... I think I'm going to lay to the switch on this one. If I lay from the switch, it's going to be really tough. So I'm going to start with the end of this siding, I guess, and go from there. Oh yeah, this is going to be a bit challenging, I think. Gonna have to be little changes, a little smooth. Okay, that did not turn out hideous. It's not great, but it's actually better than the other track. See, this is what I mean when I talk about laying to the switch instead of from the switch, because I laid from the switch for this one, and we've got that kink, but I was able to smooth it out laying to the switch. So you know what? Let's fix this side too. Let's try that. Okay, that's not perfect either, but it feels a bit better. So there we are. Got lucky that time. Placed it super nicely, so it looks like it's just one big warehouse building. Kind of makes it feel like it's more of a industry than it is. That is the one downside of cutting down all the trees around, is that it kind of feels a little bit open and barren. So more structures and signs and things to come. So now we're going to add in a couple more storage tracks over here. Flush things out a little bit. You never know if you're going to need extra storage space. So, plus it'll make things feel a little bit more whole and put together. So, let's see if we can just attach that switch right there. I should have placed the switch before I placed the groundwork, because now it's kind of, I averaged what I needed, more or less. So I'm gonna do a bit of dual groundwork lane to get there. And there we go. All right, a couple short storage tracks. So we've got some room to do some operating here now. I think that the one thing that we are missing is a runaround, though, isn't it? Yeah, we don't have any good place to run around. I might be able to mess that in there somewhere. Oh, I bet we could do that. I think we can get a passing track stuck in here. It's going to remove one of the storage tracks that we just built. But I'm fairly confident we can make this work. So, we'll see what we can do. I'm going to try and get the switches and groundwork placed first. And then this will give us a way to run around the train. It's going to make operations kind of interesting, I think. Because it's going to be a really long run around. Alright, so I'm going to put that there, and I'm going to relay the stub of this siding. And that connection. Okay, let's see. And now for the interesting part. Let's see if we can get this switch placed in here in a way that makes some amount of sense. Again, through the weeds, not around them. Might be better actually with a right-handed switch. Yeah, right-handed switch is going to line up with our other track a little easier. I think we're going to have to relay a piece of that. Which isn't too surprising. It wasn't designed with this in mind from the get-go, so it always kind of changes things. Alright, so, you know what? I'm going to cut back all the way to this switch. I really don't like trying to start laying track mid-curve. That's one of the issues with the game right now. And that'll get taken care of when we get the spline interpolation like I was talking about in the first episode. Okay, so now we just kind of got to bridge the gaps here with some fresh laid track. All right, this is starting to kind of come together. And thinking about it now, actually, with this new configuration, having all the switch stands on this side doesn't make as much sense anymore, does it? Although this one kind of had to be there because of the position, but these two that I made a big point about sightlines in my first video. Made a big point of that, and then now they're kind of in the way, but that's all right. This is kind of feeling like a bit of a yard that can actually do something now. I'm halfway tempted to toss an engine house in here. So I'm just trying to get a nice pad of groundwork out so I can have the engine shed on the level here. So maybe there. Okay, that second track's gonna be a bit of a chore to get into, but that's maybe where the porter can live. Oh lordy, this is gonna be an ordeal. The track gets a little silly when it gets that short, giant tie. Why'd they use a chunk of a bridge deck as a tie? Oh, that's neat. I didn't actually see this change. I didn't realize this was a change, that it comes with the rails pre-installed now. That's handy. I didn't actually know about that. All right, and we'll lay from here, I think. And we'll try and not get the giant tie. Yeah, that's a bit of a yoink. I'm pretty sure that the Class 70 or the Eureka would hit this door on the way in. It's not enough straight track beforehand. But I think it's alright. I think this looks cool. I don't think the real railroad would have stuffed an engine house right there, but This is my railroad, dang it. So this is now a pretty functional little yard here. We got places to store cars and locomotives, and we can hit the operation we need. All that's really left is to build the Y out of town, but I think that makes sense to do once we get our connection to the smelter and iron ore mine going. So that'll be for next time. So anyways, as always, thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you give us a like on the video, and leave a comment if you have any questions about railroads online, or if you like the video, or what would you like to see next. So as always, thanks guys. Peace.